Alrighty, good afternoon and welcome back. This is our second last tutorial session. And in this session, I'm really just going to be talking about the final assessment, which is the replacement for the final exam. We're going to go through what I'm expecting for that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the upcoming two reflections, and then I'll just be taking student questions and such. The one other thing I want to remind you is that next week is the last week before exam week. Exam weeks are starting on the Thursday, I believe, next week, which is the 9th. Let me just double check that. Yes, and going until the 15th. So exams this term start at a weird time, but I will be available and I will have a tutorial session next week, Wednesday, but it'll just be for anyone that had any questions about the final assessment and they wanted me to give a little more help there. So that's pretty much what it's going to be, because at that point, everything else is done and we're just waiting on the final assessments for the course. So before I talk about the big thing, which is the final assessment, let me just say that there are a few things that should be on our radar. And before I continue, let me turn on the transcript. I always forget to do that at the beginning. There we go. Let me get into our course website. Let me get into the student preview mode. And let me just make sure I don't have anything open. I don't want open. Sometimes I have student grades or tests and stuff open. They are all closed. Great. Let's share my screen. And I'm in the NBA section, but both of our sections are the same. So let's go to course information. And just let me scroll down to where we are. So we have a few things that are left to be done. We have the fourth reflection, which was supposed to go up earlier, but because we kind of pushed things back a little bit, we haven't done it yet. And this fourth reflection, I'm going to get up this, if not tonight, then by tomorrow. And it's going to be shorter than the other reflections. Even our last reflection, which I'm going through this week to mark, where you posted a Padlet and you were encouraging people about their fitness goals. This one's going to be pretty short as well. It's going to be a short paragraph talking a little bit about the effects of mental health or the pandemic on your mental health. I'm going to focus it a little bit so that it won't take us too terribly long. So that'll go up and that'll be due. I think I wanted to make that due on the week 13, which is next week, on our tutorial day. So it's going to be due probably that Wednesday, which is December. I should write it next to here, December 8th. Or if I get it up later, I'll move it back a day or so, but we'll get that done. Then there is quiz 5, which we pushed back to, I think I made it now due on the 6th, which is this upcoming Monday. So some of you have done it already, some of you haven't. I'm getting recordings up tomorrow and Friday in case you were planning on waiting for those recordings to help you with it. So this is due on Monday, December 6th. That hasn't changed. And the last quiz, which is only covering one chapter, I made due on December 13th. So it still has a bunch of questions, but you only have to read one chapter. So these are things that are due. The quizzes, which we've been doing all along, and this reflection. There is one more reflection, but what I'm going to do for this one is it's going to be essentially a guaranteed 4% if you do it, and it's just going to be a quick survey. And the survey is going to ask you things like, what was the thing you remembered most about the course? What was something that you were most interested in? What kind of things were the most challenging? You know, that kind of stuff for my feedback. Now, because it's going to be worth grades and participation, I'm going to see if there's a way I can make it anonymous so that I know you completed it still. And then I can give you the grades without reading your answers, tied to your name. That way it could be, you could say, this is something that I would have liked to see improved. But I can't guarantee that. So if it's something where I can't make it anonymous, then it's not going to have anything where you could, say something overly mean. It's going to be set up so that you don't have any risk. There wouldn't be a risk anyway, but I know it makes you uncomfortable if you want to say something critical and the person will know it's you that's reading it. So that'll take away all the stress for that reflection because it's just fill out the survey and you got the 4 marks. So really we have these 3 small items and then our big one, which is what I'm going to be talking about. That is the final assessment. So I have almost got that entirely completed, but I have the main thing aside from just a few little details done. So I'm going to share my screen on that. But before I do, let me just see if there's any questions about the other due dates, which I've messily wrote on the screen here. And I can, they will all have the due dates written on them, and I can always post reminders as usual. I'm just going to get some tea in the meantime. If you type a question in chat, I will take a look and I will answer it as soon as I can. So, as mentioned, we have the first thing that's coming up is that quiz, which is due on the Monday. Then we have this reflection, which I'm going to make due on the Wednesday of next week, which is going to be short. And then the survey, since it's going to be something that's participation, it'll just be due on the last day of classes, which is the 15th. As soon as I see that you got it done, I'm setting it up so you get the marks. There's nothing for me to mark, so I can give you the maximum amount of time because I don't have to, dedicate any time to it. I'll give you more information once I get it up. I just first need to see if I can actually make it anonymous so that I can get more realistic feedback from students. Okay, so the last thing and what I wanted to focus on for today was the final assessment. As you know, before I do that, let me just clear the screen, go up to the top, and I'm going to open our course addendum to highlight the marks. So remember, your lowest quiz in this course does get dropped. So if you happen to miss one or you didn't do too well on one of them, the lowest quiz does get dropped. So that helps out. And then there's the 5 reflections. One of them is essentially, actually, there were 2 that were free marks. There's the introductory reflection, which I still haven't finished grading, even though I just need to mark who did it. So that's essentially 8 free % for everyone for that first one and for this upcoming survey. We had our 3 assignments. Remember, assignment 3 is due. When did I make assignment 3 due? I made it due. I have that.
Assignment 3 is due on December 8th.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, December 8th at 11:59 p.m. Thank you. So let me go back to the, here we go. I still have my marker on the board. So that's due on December 8th. Yes. And you've had it for a little while. And the final assessment, which right at this point said to be announced. I'm going to also type it in chat just in case someone missed. Assignment 3 due on December 8th. Just because there were 2 other dates there and I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any confusion. So the final assessment, instead of doing a final exam, as I mentioned, I decided we're going to be doing a project that we hand in. And that project is writing a letter. So we have 12 days to write this letter, and it's not something you're actually sending or anything. It's basically a way of summarizing your material from this course. And as I mentioned, I'm still putting last few details together, but let me show you. It's 90% complete. I just need to finalize a few things. So as mentioned, you are going to be writing a letter to a friend or a family member. And the purpose of this letter is going to be to convince them to improve their fitness. And this is following along the line of things that we have been discussing throughout this course. You've done some assignments that gave you information about improving your nutrition, improving your diet, improving your cardiorespiratory endurance, your muscle strength, a little bit of everything throughout the course. And you're going to be choosing essentially 3 areas that you either are most interested in or that you are the most knowledgeable about, such as cardiorespiratory endurance, mental health, and nutrition. And you're going to be focusing on those 3 areas to convince your friend or family member or your younger self, I'm going to talk about that right away, that they need to improve that. So basically you get a choice here. You can choose the 3 topics that you knew best from this course, and that'll help you to get it done quicker, which is when you read, when you see 1,000 to 1,500 words, for those of you that write and you write a decent amount, you can hit this number very quickly. And in fact, many of you would often go over. But if you're not a person that really likes writing, it can be done in a little over 1,000 words. And if you're choosing the areas that you know the best, you're going to find it a lot easier to write because you're going to know most of this information. My goal with this is to take the similar amount of work that you would do studying for an exam and then going in and writing a 2 or 3 hour exam. But the difference is you have 12 days to do this. And so you can edit it, proofread it, and make sure that it's as good as it can be. So in this letter, you can write it to a friend if you happen to know a friend or you want to make up a friend that you want to improve their fitness. Maybe you're concerned. Maybe it's a family member. You have a family member that is sedentary or not really moving around as much as they should, such as me. I haven't really been getting out. Or if you want to, you can write a letter to your younger self. In other words, if you had a time machine, you could send a letter back to yourself maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and you can try to convince yourself, listen, this is how things are. You really need to do better on your cardiorespiratory endurance. So you have some flexibility here of how you want to format this, as long as it's a letter to somebody that you are going to use facts to try to convince them they should exercise, basically. And the general format, as I mentioned, is about 1,000 to 1,500 words. I have on the next page a full breakdown of what each section should have, so you can see where this kind of range comes from. And that's about 3.5 to 5 pages double spaced, which is roughly typical for something that's worth, well, it's a little short for something that's worth 25%, and you will be able to do this. Saying that, it's like I'm trying to convince myself, but I'm not. So this is written in the format of a letter, and it will have 5 main sections. The 5 sections include a short introductory paragraph. So, dear father, or dear Michael, something like that. You're introducing and saying, I'm writing to you because I'm concerned about your health. Or I'm writing to you, younger Kelly, because you need to do better than you did. Or something like this. It's an introductory paragraph about what you're writing them for. The bulk of the marks, 78 out of 100, come from the actual 3 descriptive sections. And this is going to be where you choose your 3 areas that you are most knowledgeable about, and that'll be where the bulk of your mark comes from. So that's material from the course. Then there's a final paragraph, and this is written in a way where you're encouraging them So it's a final either word of motivation. You're going to list the support you're going to give that person to help them get through these exercises and to improve. And it's basically an exercise in, motivating people and letting them know they're not alone. Whether it's to a friend or family member, you can talk about how you'd help them. If it's a letter to your younger self, you can tell yourself, hey, set little rewards for yourself. It'll help to motivate you. And we don't need APA formatted references or anything, because whenever you write a letter, you don't include a bibliography or anything like that. It's just not normal. But the assignment does require 3 different links to websites that contain some statistics. And those can just be included as a link to the website, just as the URL copied and pasted. So you don't have to worry about APA formatting here. It's just a letter. I just want to see that you have a link to a website. Now the instructions get more specific. You can use any, oh, go ahead.
Can I make hyperlinks?
Yes. So if you know how to do clickable hyperlinks, you absolutely can. And I actually am going against my initial judgment. And I have a sample paragraph or a sample section written that I'm going to go over with us in this tutorial. So that's the benefit of being here. I'm not including the sample section in the instructions, but if you see this recording, you will see an example of what one of these things would look like. And you'll see I have links that are there.
Okay, thank you.
So you can use any software you want, just as long as the final copy is in a normal format that you can submit to Blackboard and I can read. So something like a docx or a doc, which comes from Microsoft Word, a PDF file, which most word processors can export as, or something else that's a common format. You could see what kind of things Blackboard accepts. But this is just basically me saying, please don't send me a Apple Pages file. I do get these on occasion, but it means I can't read it right away. And the only way I can convert it is by sending it to my phone and converting it on my phone and then emailing it back to myself. And it's just a little bit of a hassle. So something that I can read on my computer. And I mentioned it can be done as few as 1,000 words or around up to 1,500 words, depending on how much you type. Some of my students type a lot and they aren't afraid of the number 1,500. Some of them type less. It can be done in 1,000. I'll give you an example. And the material you're using for this are your class notes, video recordings, any other resources we had in the course, as well as the online resources we access throughout the courses, including the statistics that you're going to be searching for. So you'll see what that means when you go to the specific instructions. So 12 days, if you break it up into manageable steps, if you wanted to do like one of these sections, I wrote a sample section to try it out. It took me, granted, I'm going to do it quicker than most people, but it took me about 20 to 30 minutes to write. So let's say an hour to an hour and a half to write a section. So you throw a couple of those things together and you have maybe 4.5 hours, then you've got your big main part of the assignment done. The actual thing that's worth the 78 marks. The rest is an introduction and a conclusion, which aren't really, fact heavy anyway. It's just writing words of encouragement. So let's look at the specific breakdown so you can see how this works. Introductory paragraph. Written in the form of a letter to a friend, family member, or to your younger self, in case there were things you wish you had known earlier. So as I mentioned, hey, younger Kelly, this is something that I wish you really did because now you have high blood pressure. And it could be something as, dear so-and-so, anything as long as it's formatted as a letter. That is some of the marks for getting it formatted as a letter. Keep in mind, it is the modern era. So if you wanted to get more creative with this idea of a letter, and maybe it's an email with the subject line, and it's just a really long email, that's fine, as long as it's something you're writing to someone. Then 4 marks, briefly explain the reason you're writing. And this is open to whatever you want. For instance, based on your own personal fitness, you might say something like, I've been having these problems and I know that you were worried about that. So here's what I wish I had done and how you can help prevent them. Something you learned. Maybe you found some statistics that really shocked you and you wanted to bring that to their attention so that they don't have the same problems. A recent event, such as maybe the pandemic or something that has kept us indoors, and you wanted to write to them and say, okay, here's some things you can do even during the pandemic. Concerns about their health, basically any reason that you would want to write them a letter about this concept. So I suggest between 100 and 200 words for this section, just to get a quick paragraph introducing and getting them to read. The main marks come from each of these three sections, where I recommend it's probably going to be closer to around 300 to 325 on average, but you'll see an example coming up. 250 to 400 words for each of the three sections, which can be split into 1 or 2 paragraphs if you want to make it a little bit more formatted. And within this section, I'm looking for the following. Specifically identify which area of fitness you want to talk about, such as cardiorespiratory endurance, like we did for assignment 3 and all those others where we identified the specific type, muscle endurance, muscle strength, flexibility, body composition. I've separated nutrition from body composition because there were a lot of units talking about these things, and you might want to talk about body composition in terms of the overall fat content, and maybe you want to then talk about nutrition in terms of vitamins and minerals or some other aspect. As long as you have stuff to write about, you could separate them. And mental health, which is something covered in the more recent chapters. So each of these three sections should be a different area of fitness. I'm basically letting you choose the 3 areas you think you know the best, and you can write about those as what you're convincing your friend to do. Next part, briefly describe what this type of fitness means and what it refers to. In other words, presume that it's someone that's never heard the term cardiorespiratory endurance in their life, and you want to explain what does that mean. So there I'd be talking a little bit about what the cardiorespiratory system does and why it's important. So just give them a quick little intro. It doesn't need to include a ton of detail, just enough so that they know what you're talking about. Briefly describe why this type of fitness is important. And this is something we've been doing a lot throughout this course, so this shouldn't be a huge issue. Either giving an example of a risk if you're not fit in this area. For instance, if you don't have good cardiorespiratory endurance, you might have high blood pressure, or might be at a greater risk of a stroke or a heart attack. You could also give, I should say you should also give a benefit. So it says, let me clear off the distractions here. Where did I put my, there we go. It says at least one benefit and at least one risk. Benefits of cardiorespiratory endurance might be talking about your ability to do physical tasks more efficiently and effectively, and your ability to do them without getting sore. I'm using these examples specifically because they're the ones I have in the sample section I'll show you. And as long as you aren't, copying them, if you're focusing on different aspects, you can still do cardiorespiratory endurance, but, just try to choose something a little different from the example. That's why I was wrestling with myself, because I don't want to give an example that students just copy. So that's worth the most of this section, 6 marks. The rest are all 4 or 6 for this one other one coming up. And that tells you it's important because you're giving 2 benefits, or 1 benefit and 1 risk, and these have to come from the material in our course. You want to tell them exactly what you learned and why it's a risk or a benefit. Then to back that up, this is where there's a little outside research. I want you to include a statistic that helps support your argument. whether this is a statistic that shows the risk or a statistic that shows the benefits. So what I mean by this could be, let's say you were talking about risks of cardiovascular disease, and you wanted to include a statistic that shows how many Canadians are affected by cardiovascular disease. Something like that would help emphasize the point that you want them to focus on cardiorespiratory endurance. You only need to do it for one of the things you talked about, either a risk or a benefit. And it should be a recent statistic, so something from at least 2016 or later. That gives you a lot of leeway because a lot of the studies go back to 2016, but that's recent enough. And it should be specific to Canada because this is a Canadian course and it emphasizes Canadian fitness. It should be relative to Canada. So that may limit you in some ways. If you're writing a letter to your former self and you didn't live in Canada, you can still say, just talk about the Canadian statistics. That's how I kind of work this requirement for the course into it, because you need to talk a little bit about Canada. So after that, we have the section where you're going to tell them what they can do to improve this area. This could be an example of a type of exercise, some other activity, or any tips that will improve this area of fitness. For instance, if it's related to body composition or nutrition, you might have a section talking about cooking tips, or you might want to specify some way of managing their nutrition or body composition. Or for the other aspects, such as muscular endurance, muscular strength, flexibility, etc., there are exercises you might want to talk about. But basically, you're going to tell them what they can do to work on this, and it should connect to the FIT principle. You don't have to go through all 4 parts, but you might want to say, for example, you should have 3 to 5 days a week of at least 20 to 60 minutes of moderate physical activity, if you're talking about cardiorespiratory endurance, for example. So in some way, I want you to connect it to the FIT principle that you're thinking about it. But remember is frequency, intensity, type, and time. The number of times a week you do it, how intense it is when you do it, the type of exercises, which body groups, which muscles you're working on, and how much time you spend doing it in each session. You could also list any equipment or resources they may need. Think of it as this is the section where you're helping them get started. Then we have provide them with a link to a website or other online resource that can help them in this area of fitness. So there's technically 3 more websites, but this doesn't have to be any sort of like a statistics website. So these are going to be easy to find. For instance, maybe there's a video that walks them through the exercises you're recommending. Link it. Tell them you should check out this video. It shows you how to do these isometric exercises to improve this aspect of your fitness. So it could be a video, maybe it's a tool to help plan nutritious meals. Maybe it's any other resource like a website that has a couple exercise tips, something to help them with that specific type of fitness. So all in all, this is kind of a summary of the course, all the material we talked about in the course for one of those main areas of fitness. And we're going to have 3 of these sections. And this is my way of assessing you in a bunch of different places from the course, but you get to choose the ones you know best. There's a few more marks left, so let me go to the other page and then I can come back and take questions. Let me clear this. There's the final paragraph where it's basically words of encouragement. So to end this letter, you'll briefly talk about how you'll encourage, motivate, or support this person in improving their fitness. For instance, if you're writing to your younger self, you could talk about how you could encourage, motivate, or support yourself by setting little goals and rewards for yourself. If you're writing to a friend or family member, you can say that you're going to go jogging with them, or you're going to say that I will send you daily texts to encourage you. We're going to buy a gym membership together. Give them some sort of support. Think of it as your actual friend or family member. What could you tell them to let them know you're there to help them with the fitness? And as we discussed in this course, this is one of the hardest things, is feeling the motivation and feeling like you're trying an impossible task alone. So this is emphasizing the mental health aspect and the importance of having a supportive friend or family member that can help you through the exercise. In other words, end the letter positively and let them know that they can succeed. So this is where you get to be a little more creative and send some words of support. There's 10 more marks out of 100. All of these values seem high because I just made it add up to 100 for easy math. Realistically, I could have divided these all by 2 or 3 or something, but this is just easy numbers. There's 4 marks for how clearly you communicate your ideas along with having few errors. I'm not going to be as focused on grammar, but things like spelling aren't super important. This is only worth 4 marks. But if it's absolutely, riddled with spelling, grammatical errors, it makes it harder for people to understand the information. So I'm treating this more as how clearly it's communicated rather than going through and looking at spelling and grammar specifically. It's not an English course. It's a course where you're talking about fitness. Organized into logical sections and flows properly, it should flow like a letter, and your person reading it shouldn't feel lost as they're reading it. It should make sense. And should be formatted as a letter, creative, interesting to read. Just these kind of small things that can give you not free marks, but easy to grab marks. So all in all, this adds up to 100 marks, which I then just divide by 4 to give you your 25% in the course. I do have an example coming up, but let me pop up a poll to see if there's any questions so far about what's being expected. And where'd my poll go? Here it is. So when you just see 1,000 to 1,500, that always seems scary at first until you realize you know these things and you've written these things throughout the course. So being able to write a little bit on each of these topics should be not a problem, especially if you sort of space it out as something you can do a little bit one day, a little bit the other day. And remember, you have 12 days to almost guarantee yourself as close to 100% as possible. So think of it as like a good thing, even if you hate writing. I hate writing too, so that's why I'm trying to, mention that. I do have one question that's going to be typed in chat, and I'm just waiting to answer it. Can we talk only about only one aspect of fitness like cardio? What about muscle strength, endurance, to recommend a balanced workout plan? Yeah, so if you are going to talk about muscle strength, muscle endurance, and cardiorespiratory endurance, those are 3 of the sections from our course, and that would be fine. So for instance, if I go up to here, I could have one of my sections, so one of these chunks of 1 or 2 paragraphs on cardiorespiratory endurance. I could have the next section focusing on muscle endurance. In this case, I would be looking at probably my legs, my arms, my back, everything in general. And then I could also focus on muscle strength. And the overall letter could be about a balanced workout program. Maybe you're writing the letter to someone because you want them to join a sports league with you. And so you want to work on their general fitness overall. In which case, if you chose those 3 areas, yeah, they're all different enough that you can get specific information, specific benefits for each of them and meet all the requirements of this assignment. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're asking, but hopefully it might have helped answer the question. So let's take a look at what kind of thing I might be expecting here. Now, as I mentioned, I don't normally like doing this because I don't want people to copy. But if you do cardiorespiratory endurance, just focus on different aspects of it. But what I've done is I've quickly written an example section that I didn't go through or proofread or anything, but I just wrote it. I wrote it in about 20 minutes to 30 minutes. I wasn't writing as fast as I could. I was trying to slow myself down, and I was trying to look up information in my textbook as I wrote it to get a feel for how long it would take students to write. And to also show you the kind of level of detail I'm looking for. In 1,000 to 1,500 words, you can't get very detailed. I'm just looking for a little bit of everything. So I'm going to do the English teacher thing. I'm going to read with you and I'm going to highlight some of the things. So this is a section. It's not the introductory paragraph. I would have had an introductory paragraph, and now I'm going to talk about cardiorespiratory endurance. So I say something like, first thing I want to talk to you about is your cardiorespiratory endurance. And I'm thinking of this as a letter to myself when I was younger, or it could be a letter to someone like me that needs to improve. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is your cardiorespiratory endurance. This refers to your heart's ability to effectively and efficiently pump blood throughout your body, which is important because this is how your body receives the nutrients you eat, takes in oxygen, and gets rid of carbon dioxide, and affects your ability to do pretty much all physical tasks. So I've clearly identified cardiorespiratory endurance, and I explained what it is to someone that has no idea what cardiorespiratory endurance means. Now I need to talk about benefits or risks. Having good cardiorespiratory endurance is important because it reduces your risk of cardiovascular diseases such as high blood pressure, coronary heart disease, and heart attacks, stroke, and other conditions as your heart has to work harder to do its job. So this comes from my textbook, and I'm describing the risks for having poor cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory endurance. So I can just write risks here. I included a statistic for this one because I figured this would help. I said, did you know that about 17.5% of Canadians in your age range, 20 to 39, experience some level of hypertension, that these numbers are higher in males like yourself and only increase with age, followed by a link to a Stats Canada website that highlights these exact statistics. So I'm telling myself, hey, you're at risk for hypertension, so you better start paying attention to this. It's true, and let's face it, you're not getting any younger. So this is where I'm treating it as though I'm actually writing a letter to someone, and it's kind of filler language, but it's making it maybe a little bit more realistic or fun to read, I guess. And if it's written to me, then this is something that I might need to hear because the risk of this does increase with age. That's what the statistics show. So now I've talked about risks and I've given my statistic. I've got those sections done. In addition, improving your cardiorespiratory endurance will improve your cellular metabolism, increasing the number of capillaries in your muscles, helping to provide them with more fuel and oxygen and remove waste more effectively. It could even help heal injuries and reduce muscle aches, which would help reduce your discomfort after a long day of work. This comes again from our textbook describing some of the benefits of cardiorespiratory endurance. So one of the benefits is reducing your risk, but I talked about the risks as a risk, and then now I'm mentioning these things as benefits. They're healing injuries faster, reducing muscle aches. So for all of this, I've got the kind of facts about the type of fitness, the risks, the benefits, and I have a statistic that backs it up. The rest of this is me telling the person what they can do. So what can you do to improve this? First, you should set goals for yourself, such as eventually being able to walk back home from work without feeling exhausted. For me, this would be a long walk, but it might be a walk I want to do. I've done long walks sometimes when I just wanted to get a little more exercise. I would walk home from work, but I would be absolutely bloody exhausted. So to improve your cardiorespiratory endurance, you should aim to do at least 20 to 60 minutes of moderate exercises like walking fast or jogging 3 to 5 times a week, enough to get your heart rate up a bit. I could have chosen to go into more detail here because we know about the maximum heart rate and the 65 to 90%. But in general, I've given a decent amount of detail here. I've said that you need to set goals, and I mentioned something related to the FIT principle. I talked a little bit about intensity, frequency, and time, 20 to 60 minutes. I also mentioned the type, which is walking or jogging. So this section also applies to the FIT principle. I have to also talk about resources needed or equipment. This requires no equipment other than a watch, so for keeping time, though you might want to monitor your heart rate by checking your pulse on your wrist or under your neck. So I've met all the requirements there. I've talked about the FIT principle. I described the thing that they could do, which is jogging or walking fast 3 to 5 times a week. And I mentioned resources needed. If you keep this up, you could make progress in 4 to 6 months. This is more facts I'm including from the textbook, which tells you about how long until you might be making realistic progress. Finally, to help you get started, this article includes some of the benefits of cardiorespiratory exercises and talks about 14 different options to get you started. Maybe you could find something that would get you out of the house, or maybe you could find a new hobby. As a way of giving them a list of options, this included exercises like biking or swimming, walking up and down stairs, and it was a link to a website that had some beginner-friendly tips for starting cardio exercises. So something like that is roughly the level of detail I'm looking at. And notice that most of the stuff here isn't taking like real deep studying and real deep into the background info. It's largely surface level, and it's just talking a little bit about everything. So something like this, maybe not quite 100%, pretty close, because there's a few things I could have improved, but I probably end up giving something like that 100%. Because I kind of adjust for things. I know we're in a pandemic situation, which changes how we do work, and it changes our stress levels. So this could be one section, and it's just a little over 1 page, double spaced with Calibri 12-point font. This should probably be Times New Roman. Oop. So just over 1 page, double spaced in Times New Roman. And I would need 2 more and my intro and final paragraph. So like I said, this probably won't take very long to write now that you see an example of what this looks like. Let me run the poll again to see if there's any questions there. Like that's why I actually went through it myself here, just to see if it seemed a reasonable length and it didn't seem too problematic. Yeah, I'm going to answer the questions in the chat. This is how many websites we need to suggest for each area. So there are, now that I look at this, there are going to be 6 websites that you need. And these all come from the, what's it called? The information section, the sections where you're describing each of the, like the main section. So for instance, over here for cardiorespiratory endurance, one website contained stats. So I used Stat Canada, and this study was talking about high blood pressure in Canadians. I knew that cardiorespiratory endurance was important and related for blood pressure, so I searched up Canada stats blood pressure, and I found a website that gave me stats pretty quickly. For the other resource, we've gone through a couple examples of resources in class, or you could find a website or resource that's different from what we did. If you're looking for a video, there's tons of videos online, so those would be easy to find. It could be a YouTube link. But this would be the second one, which is a resource to help them get started in that fitness. So if there's 2 websites for each, that adds up to 6 websites in the end. And you just need to include the link. You don't have to like APA format it or anything. Which is why if you break it up into maybe 3 days, do a little bit each day, you should be able to get that done. Second, can information from textbooks be minimal? General knowledge about fitness would be common with the info in textbooks, though. So can information from textbooks be minimal? You should include at least some of the things we've discussed throughout the course. For instance, I did mention, even though I don't get incredibly specific, I do mention the, where did I go over here? That it reduces risks of cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, heart attack, stroke, and other conditions. And this is one of the areas of saying I might have been able to include a little bit more detail, but this is relatively general already. But this is what it talks about in the textbook. In our textbook later about improving cellular metabolism, this fact here, increasing the number of capillaries in your muscles and helping to provide them with more fuel and oxygen, might not be common knowledge, but it's written in the textbook. So I don't think I fully get the intent of the question. I don't think I'm understanding the real question you're asking. It should be something that we've talked about in this course, and it should avoid things like working on muscle strength is good for your health. You know, something that's ridiculously general that makes it seem like you didn't use any of the information from the course at all. It's just something like, well, it'll help you not get sick or get hurt. That's too general. Get a little bit more specific than that. Similar to the level of specificity I did here on number of capillaries in the muscles, or talking about reducing the risk of cardiorespiratory diseases. Notice that to support this part that actually was a little bit more general, I included statistics. So I was kind of supporting that part of the paper by adding more specific facts about Canadians. That's the, so when I said the question that was really being asked, you knew what I was asking. So in other words, so I have to read the entire text again? No, and this is why you can choose the 3 areas that you know the best. But if you wanted to, you could go back and get specific references from those areas. A lot of that material comes from our slideshow as well. And a lot of it, if you remember us talking about it, you can find the information by searching it online. So it's not like you're going to find another textbook that says that having poor cardiorespiratory endurance is good because it makes you have coronary heart disease and heart attacks. If it like says the opposite, you're not going to find that. This information is the same because they're all talking about the same stuff. So you could use information from other textbooks as long as it's something you know we covered in this class. My goal when I look at this is, did this person actually link it to the material we discussed in class, or are they just completely making things up that we in no way ever talked about? And by discussing this class, I mean either through the assignments, through these tutorials, through the recorded lectures, or through the textbook slides or the textbook itself, just as long as it was something that was discussed. We talked about pretty much most aspects of fitness, so pretty much all information will be okay. I'm going to pop up the poll again just to see if there's some other questions. And this is where I was struggling with myself, where I think that this still does assess you in a good variety of areas, but it lets you choose the areas you're best at. And it does include a decent amount of writing, but it feels like a fair decent amount of writing. So I'm struggling to get this balance, but I think people should be able to do well in this. And like I said, don't worry as much about the grammar as long as I can understand it and it's clearly communicated. I don't penalize people if English is your second language, unless it's absolutely mangled to the point where I can't read it. And the only other thing that can get you in trouble is using plagiarism. So just as one quick reminder, because this is actually writing, before I end it and open it up for any other questions, I want people to remember something. I'm just setting something up on my website. Oh, they changed the way the website looks. Interesting. So nope, that is my work schedule. Can you see right now where it says fitness assignment, data management and everything? I don't know how this screen sharing works. Okay, good. I wasn't sure if it would just show any Word window that was open, because that could have been a disaster. So let's do something here. Let's say I'm going to take this section. So what can you do to improve this? First, you should set goals for yourself and eventually be able to walk home, etc. I'm now going to go to the website that I told you all your professors know exists, which is Spinbot. And I'm going to paste my text into Spinbot because you know you're a student and you've copied an essay that someone has already written and you ran it through Spinbot. It wants me to prove I'm a human. There we go. So let's see what it changed my text into. So you copy something from the internet because you think you're sneaking past the professor, and your submitted paper says, anyway, what would you be able to do to work on this? In the first place, you should lay out objectives for yourself. For example, at least having the option to stroll back home from work without feeling depleted. To work on your cardiorespiratory perseverance, you should plan to do no less than 20 an hour of moderate activities like strolling quick or running 3 to 5 times each week, enough to get your pulse up a little. This is actually way better than it used to be. This almost looks like something that a student could have written. That's not the point I was trying to make. The point was that it was supposed to stand out so clearly as being fake. I'll take one other section with a little bit more facts here. Let's take the section about our health concerns. Wow, good job, Spinbot. I'm going to add it to the bottom here. These conditions might conceivably prompt truly well-being concerns. Okay, and here's more what I'm used to. This doesn't sound like something that anyone would ever say. Or even demise. Did you realize that around 75% of Canadians at your age range experience some degree of hypertension, that these numbers are higher in guys such as yourself and just increment with age? So there's some warning signs here that tell me, okay, this has probably not been written by a student. This has probably been copied and run through Spinbot. So I just wanted to re-warn you about this, that we know these things exist and we do check for them for all these assignments. And some of them do slip through, but most of them we catch, and it usually ends up as either a warning or an academic misconduct. And you don't want that to be you after you got through the whole course doing very well and the final exam has a problem. So just please do your own writing. I'm marking this reasonably. So yeah. Full-size aortic pump. Does it say that somewhere? Or are you trying it yourself? You're testing it on your own things. Yeah, there's some really weird things, especially names. There's a story that I won't worry about that. I've seen some interesting things. I saw insecticide repellent in one of my biology classes got turned to bug shower safe, which was really weird. So insecticide repellent, insecticide, I think it was just insecticide, and it became something like bug shower. So it was weird, and it was something that I'd never seen before until I read it in that paper. And you see a phrase like this, you think that's a really weird phrase. So, oh, okay. That's a reference from Friends. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, so please don't do it. We find it. Okay, I'm gonna stop the sharing there. I'll put up the poll one more time because I did just talk about cheating. Let me see if there's any other questions at all while you're here. I never actually watched Friends, so I'm very behind in that. Famously, I watched almost no Seinfeld at all. And apparently, I always say things like George Costanza says, and my friends make fun of me all the time because I keep saying Costanza phrase, and I don't know why. Okay, it looks like there aren't any questions. So with that, I think I'm going to end it here. I got a meeting I'm getting to in a little bit, so I'll quickly cram some food down before then. So everyone, take care. Email me if you have any questions. Don't forget the next assignment is due on the Monday, and I'm going to get our reflection up, which will be a reasonable length, not long, and that'll be due on the Wednesday. The rest of the due dates, I'm also going to post as an announcement, just as a refresher. And take care. Let me end the recording now, and I'll stick around if there's any other questions. Bye.